Hello, this video is intended as background to the section of the Cambridge AS level history syllabus entitled Why Was Napoleon Bonaparte Able to Overthrow the Directory in 1799? It's an outline of events, including the aims and rule of the Directory, as well as its reputation and opposition to it, and then the military reputation and political ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte. We'll see how dissatisfaction with the Directory on the one hand and Napoleon's rise to prominence on the other enabled him to seize power in the coup of 1799 that effectively signaled the end of the French Revolution. We begin with Maximilien Robespierre, one of the most famous or infamous names associated with the French Revolution. This was a man who became so obsessed with the aims of the revolution that he and other members of the Committee of Public Safety were prepared to send to the guillotine thousands of people whom they viewed as a threat to the revolution. Eventually, with many political figures wondering whether it was going to be their head that was going to be the next to roll, a group of the members of the National Convention and Committee of Public Safety orchestrated a coup on 27th of July, 1794. Robespierre and his closest allies were arrested, and he was executed by guillotine the following day, marking the end of the Reign of Terror. This group became known as the Thermidorians, after the revolutionary month of Thermidor, during which the coup occurred. They included moderate revolutionaries, former members of the Girondin faction, and others who had grown disillusioned with the extreme measures and constant purges of the Reign of Terror. After seizing power, the Thermidorians sought to reduce the level of political repression. They dismantled the revolutionary government apparatus, closed the revolutionary tribunals, and released many political prisoners. They wanted to restore stability and order to French society and encouraged a return to more moderate and conservative values, including a revival of religious worship and the reopening of churches. The Thermidorians established a new constitution, which created the Directory, a 5-member executive body, plus a 2-chamber legislature. One of the primary aims of the Directory was to end the internal strife and economic turmoil that had plagued France during the radical phase of the revolution. It sought to achieve a balance between liberty and order, promoting a bourgeois republicanism that favored the interests of the middle class. The Directory also aimed to continue the war efforts against the coalition of European monarchies, intending to spread revolutionary ideals and secure France's borders. If I'd been a middle-class Frenchman in those days, I think I'd have been quite happy. It seemed as if, at last, some sanity was going to prevail. But not for long. For all its high ideals, the Directory turned out to be politically unstable and corrupt. It struggled to maintain control as it faced opposition from a broad spectrum of the political landscape. The directors often resorted to repressive measures and the manipulation of elections to maintain power. In addition, the Directory's economic policies were largely unsuccessful, leading to inflation and continued financial crisis. Also, the directors were often more concerned with personal gain than the welfare of the state. The frequent use of military force to suppress dissent further tarnished its image, as it seemed to betray the revolutionary ideals of liberty and equality. Opposition to the Directory came from various quarters. The Royalists, who wanted to bring back the monarchy, viewed the Directory as an illegitimate government and plotted its overthrow. And at the other end of the political spectrum, the Jacobins and other radical groups saw the Directory as a betrayal of the revolution, as it moved away from the egalitarian principles of 1793. And the general populace, suffering from economic hardship and disillusioned with the political chaos, grew increasingly apathetic, but also hostile on occasion towards the government. The Directory's foreign policy also faced criticism. While it achieved some military successes, such as those of young General Napoleon Bonaparte's campaigns in Italy, these victories were offset by failures elsewhere. The ongoing wars drained France's resources and contributed to the economic difficulties. Something was going to have to change. And in revolutionary France, change, when it did come, tended to happen very quickly. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte and the 1799 coup that overthrew the Directory. But before we look at that event, let's take a few minutes to examine Napoleon's rise to prominence. Born in 1769 in Corsica, just after its annexation by France, Napoleon's early life was marked by a fervent dedication to military studies. He graduated from the École Militaire in Paris and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the French army at the age of 16. His early military career was relatively unremarkable until the French Revolution provided the chaotic backdrop for his rise. Napoleon's first significant military achievement came during the siege of Toulon in 1793, where he was appointed a commander of artillery. His innovative strategies and daring tactics led to the recapture of the city from royalist forces and the British Navy. And this victory earned him a promotion to brigadier general and recognition as a promising military talent. Napoleon was on the way up. But it was in the Italian campaign of 1796 to 1797 where Napoleon truly made his mark. As the commander of the French army of Italy, he faced the formidable challenge of fighting the well-established armies of Austria and its allies. Through a series of rapid, audacious maneuvers and decisive battles, Napoleon outwitted and defeated his enemies, forcing Austria to sue for peace. The Treaty of Campo Formio, which concluded the campaign, expanded French territory and bolstered Napoleon's reputation as a military genius. Napoleon's success in Italy was not solely due to his military prowess. It was also a product of his political acumen, as he adeptly managed relations with the Italian states. Then, in 1798, Napoleon led a bold and ambitious military expedition to Egypt, aimed at undermining British influence in the Mediterranean and establishing French dominance in the Middle East. Napoleon's forces landed at Alexandria in July, before rapidly advancing into the interior, defeating the Mamluks, Egypt's ruling military caste, at the Battle of the Pyramids. This victory allowed him to capture Cairo and establish control over much of the country. However, the campaign began to encounter significant difficulties. The British Royal Navy, under Admiral Horatio Nelson, destroyed the French fleet anchored in Aboukir Bay in the Battle of the Nile, cutting off Napoleon's forces from France and leaving them stranded in Egypt. Napoleon's Egyptian campaign ultimately failed, and he abandoned his army in Egypt and returned to France, where he was received as a national hero. Now you might well ask, how was he thought of as a hero if his Egyptian campaign had failed? Well, because he controlled the narrative. He and his supporters highlighted the successes of the Egyptian campaign and downplayed the failures, emphasizing the achievements of the scientists, scholars, and artists whom he'd taken to Egypt, as well as focusing on military victories such as the Battle of the Pyramids. And amidst all the dissatisfaction with the Directory's rule, there was talk about him being the potential savior of the country. It was showtime. Soon after Napoleon's return to France, he was approached by Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, one of the directors, with a plan to overthrow the Directory. Sieyès, along with Roger Ducos, another director, aimed to replace the existing government with a more centralized and authoritarian regime. The coup was meticulously planned. On the eve of 18 Brumaire, Napoleon was appointed commander of all troops in Paris. The following day, the Council of Ancients, the upper legislative body under the Directory, was persuaded that they and the lower house, the Council of 500, should move to Saint-Cloud, outside Paris, under the pretext of a possible Jacobin conspiracy. This maneuver effectively isolated the legislators. On 19 Brumaire, Napoleon, along with his troops, confronted the legislative assemblies at Saint-Cloud. His initial intention was to gain their support for the coup and establish a new government with him at the helm. However, the situation did not unfold as smoothly as he had anticipated. When he entered the chamber of the Council of 500, he faced resistance from the deputies. Accusations were hurled at him, and there was a chaotic uproar. In this tense atmosphere, Napoleon, usually composed and commanding, lost his poise and was momentarily at a loss. And this is when Napoleon's younger brother, Lucien, came to the rescue. Lucien was at the time very conveniently the president of the Council of 500. Amidst the chaos, Lucien stood before the assembly and proclaimed that Napoleon's life was in imminent danger, asserting that there were assassination attempts being plotted against him by some of the very deputies present in the chamber. This fabrication by Lucien was a masterstroke of manipulation. There was no evidence of any such assassination plots, but in the heightened emotional state of the moment, the claim seemed plausible to many. By framing the situation as an urgent threat to Napoleon's life, Lucien skillfully tapped into the loyalty and protective instincts of the soldiers. These troops, many of whom who had served under Napoleon in his military campaigns, held a deep respect and admiration for their general. The idea that their revered leader was in danger triggered an immediate response. The soldiers, convinced that they were acting to safeguard their beloved general, were galvanized into action. They moved swiftly and decisively, entering the legislative chambers and forcefully removing the deputies. And this action effectively dissolved the Directory and the existing legislative bodies. The deed was done. In the aftermath of the coup, a consulate was established with Napoleon as first consul, Sieyès and Ducos as the other two, albeit with significantly less power. The new government was initially presented as a provisional arrangement, but it quickly solidified Napoleon's control. The Constitution of the Year 8, ratified in December 1799, further entrenched Napoleon's authority. The coup of 18th and 19th Brumaire is often seen as a turning point in the French Revolution, marking the transition from a tumultuous period of radical republicanism to a more stable authoritarian regime under Napoleon. It demonstrated Napoleon's adeptness at political maneuvering and his ability to capitalize on the prevailing discontent within the Directory. The coup also highlighted the fragility of the revolutionary government structures and the willingness of the military to support a strong leader who promised stability and glory. Ultimately, the coup of 1799 paved the way for Napoleon's ascent to complete power and the establishment of a regime that would leave a lasting impact on France and Europe. Thank you for watching.